If you follow me on social media, you know that I'm a bit of a joker. I love wordplay and I love memes. And I'm going to be talking a lot about Algol. Algol follows me everywhere. Everywhere I go. I attract clients that have planets in Algol. I mean, people always talk to me about Algol. So Mercury conjunct Algol, just a little joke about Algol, although you really can't joke about Algol. How's it going over there? It's all a bit intense. So it can be, Algol is this, difficult star. Historically, it was always known as the most unlucky star, the associated with ghouls and demons and everything else. But I want to, talk about, what Algol means before I get into the royal family. So let's just calm down. Algol is a binary star, and from our perspective, when we look at Algol, it is the third eye of the Medusa. But what causes this flickering of the star is that it's a binary system. So it's occulted by another star, and so it appears to flicker, and it's in position of the Medusa. So the whole tableau in the sky, you can see it in the summer up here in the northern hemisphere. So you have Andromeda, which is a huge constellation down here, and here's Perseus. And Cassiopeia is that triangle. It appears to be upside down sometimes. And the story goes that Andromeda was chained to the rocks, and Perseus had to rescue her. And Cassiopeia said that Andromeda was the most beautiful goddess in the world, and she had to be rescued by Perseus. By the way, I had a cat named Perseus for a very long period of time. I mean, it was a bit of a joke for me. Perseus, you get it? Perseus, my cat. But anyway, Perseus was the rescuer. Now, he was in a position where he had to rescue this maiden, and all the gods were giving him different gifts to rescue this maiden. Mercury is one of them, gave him his famous winged shoes, the Athena's shield, and things like that to rescue Andromeda. And he used the shield to kill Medusa, because if you looked at Medusa, you'd turn to stone. And so he used this shield to get her reflection and then cut her head off. But the backstory is even more interesting, because what happened was Medusa was one of the most beautiful women around, and she was devoted to Athena. And it depends on which account you read or whose point of view you're looking at to determine whether or not she was guilty of what she was accused of. So she was in Athena's temple, and Neptune, either he raped her or she seduced him. It depends on the story you're looking at. But whatever happened, Athena was outraged, and she punished Medusa by turning her hair into snaky locks, which is why I got my hair into plaits today. So it's an incredible story. But like I say, it depends on which side you're looking at and how you're listening to the story. So Medusa has appeared in different star maps throughout the history, but she looks like this. I mean, in the constellations, the snaky locks are here. The third eye would be around here, and it flickers because of this binary system going on. But one of the questions I had about Algol is that it's in Taurus. For us nowadays, it's at 26 degrees Taurus. I couldn't understand. Okay, so it's meant to be in this sign that's associated with pastoral scenes, with cows, with whatever. How did it get involved in violence? And I could never really understand that until I started looking at the Vedic system of astrology. And then we get something completely different and more interesting. Algol is actually in the nakshatra of Kritika. So here is the Kritika nakshatra. Kritika means the cutters. And so here you can see the cutting of the head, or the violence, or the stabbing, or whatever. You can understand how it's associated with violence or difficulties. And I'm just going to magnified this little bit here, the Pleiades, the Weeping Sisters. And here is the whole entire constellation of the Weeping Sisters. So you can see how Algol is actually associated with grief, with sorrow, with violence, with decapitation, or whatever. And let me say too that in my research on Algol, if you have Algol with the personal planet, please don't think that I'm telling you that you're going to lose your head or anything like that. It's nothing like that. There's been plenty of people who have, yes, have lost their head through Algol connections, but there's plenty of people who haven't. So please don't get too caught up and think that, you know, violence is going to follow you throughout your life because your sun is conjunct Algol, or your moon is conjunct Algol. Here's a little picture of Algol, looking quite freaky. And the story of Algol, here's Neptune or Poseidon seducing, or however you want to look at that. Like I say, it depends on who's telling the story of Medusa. And here's a photo from Edward Coley Burne-Jones from the 19th century, Mercury giving up his shoes. Now from the severed head of Medusa came the winged horse, as well as Chrysaor, which are becoming important mythological characters. And just to put a little bit of context into sort of modern terms, Deborah Winger has the sun conjunct Algol. And what she is known for, she's very beautiful, of course, but she's known for her kind of raspy voice, and also her difficulty to work with as an actress. But if you hear her story, she would say, okay, listen, there's all these men that I've worked with throughout the years who are just as difficult as I'm said to be, but their difficultness is almost like a badge of honor. Whereas if I say, no, I'm not going to do this, I don't want to do that, and you won't push me to this, I'm seen as difficult. So this is kind of the point that I'm making with Algol, is it depends on which story you're listening to, on whether or not someone is guilty of whatever they're being charged with. Another person who's got Algol contacts is Leo Buscaglia, the love doctor. What he was known for, he did a class called Love 101, which is one of the most popular courses in American universities. And he was known to hug his audience members, and they would all say he has the most lovely hug, a way of touching people that makes them feel like their souls are touching each other. And so he has Venus conjunct Algol at 25 degrees Taurus. And James Cont, the sort of the iconic tough guy, has Mars at 26 degrees Taurus, which is conjunct Algol. You know, he was married several times. He had children with different women, and he was just known as this guy who would associate with violence and just that general sort of hardcore male energy. But he has Mars conjunct Algol. And there's lots of other people too. You can look at celebrities and Isadora Duncan, a very famous dancer who had her neck broken by a scarf around her neck, and the scarf got caught in the wheels of a car and broke her neck. There's all sorts of people that have this Algol connection. Mick Jagger, John Lennon, many people. But I only have time to just do a few. Julia Gregory wrote this book called Sickened, The True Story of a Lost Childhood. Now, she wasn't sick, but her mother was definitely very, very sick. I only have a noon chart for this, but you can see that her sun is conjunct Algol. So Julia's mother made her go through like open heart surgery and all sorts of other sort of terrible procedures because she had Munchausen's by proxy. So it's a very, very sad story. So these are just a few examples. Oh, okay. I forgot about this one. This is the day the music died. Plane crash kills 3 rock and roll idols. So that is Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens were killed in this terrible plane crash. If you saw my talk on this subject last week for ESAR, you'll know that I talked about Mars on Algol, and Richie Valens has a planet conjunct Algol as well. But here we go. Little bit of a trigger warning. All the people that were involved in this plane crash died because they were brain avulsed. They had terrible head injuries, including the pilot. The 3 musicians were actually ejected from the plane. The pilot, who was not qualified to fly this plane, was strapped into the plane. So he was not thrown out of the plane, but the other musicians were. So you can imagine this horrible scene that the farmer came across on the morning that of this plane crash. Very, very sad. Buddy Holly had a pregnant wife who heard the news via the radio, and she ended up miscarrying. The Big Bopper left a pregnant wife. He already had a child, but the child that was born wanted to. There was like an internet story 20 years ago or so that they were suggesting that the Big Bopper had been shot by Buddy Holly because they found Buddy Holly's revolver on the plane. So they actually exhumed the Big Bopper to see what was going on, and there was Algol implications there. And then Richie Valens had Algol natal conjunctions going on too. Yeah, it's a very, very sad story. This the day the music died. But anyway, so Mars is conjunct Algol. So just to give you some context about where I'm coming from with Algol, and I want to tell you the story about how England became England, and the story of a time where 3 kings have been on the throne within 1 calendar year. And the first time was in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. So Edward the Confessor died in late 1065, and he left no known heirs. So there was like a scramble to see who would get the crown for 1066. So Harold Godwinson was allegedly promised the crown, but he was challenged by Harold Hardrada, who was a Viking. So what happened with this battle was Harold Godwinson went down to the south coast of England in the hopes of fighting William of Normandy, and the wind blew the wrong way. So William, who was trying to come in from France, couldn't get into England. He was delayed. So Harold Godwinson went up north to fight Harold Hardrada, the Viking, and of course he won that battle. But he marched his soldiers back down to the south coast of England, where they met with William the Conqueror, as he would be known, and they were defeated. And so in this particular year, Edward the Confessor died, Harold Godwinson took over, and then William the Conqueror would eventually fight Harold Godwinson and win the crown. So in that year of 1066, there were 3 kings on the throne. And you can see the story of 1066 on the Bayeux Tapestry in France. It's actually a really beautiful piece of work. It tells the story beautifully. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. It's one of these things that I would love to do and aspire to do. So here's all the arrows flying through, telling the story of Harold fighting his battle. And here is the Battle of Hastings chart. Now, again, I don't have the exact time that they were fighting, but I do have roughly the chart that's going on. And Neptune is roughly where Algol is now. So Algol is at 26 degrees Taurus, but we have Neptune that would have crossed over and crossed back. And the reason why I think this is important is because we're marking out kind of a brand new sort of England with a brand new king. And I think that when you are looking at a time 1066, all British school children know what 1066 means. When you're marking this out, it's important to realize, okay, that's where we are. And as you shall see, Algol plays an extremely important part in the British monarchy. There we go. Okay, the next time there were 3 kings in 1 year was the famous Princes in the Tower. So we have Edward IV, who died, and then his young son, very young son, I believe he's 8 or 9 years old, was promised to be king. But they had this really dastardly uncle that William Shakespeare makes out to be the ultimate villain, Richard III. In England, if you say Richard III, everybody automatically hisses because he's the ultimate villain of this story. So what he allegedly did, according to Shakespeare, was that he put Edward V and his little brother in the Tower, the Tower of London. And I'll show you a picture of the Tower of London. I'll show you what it looks like. But the 2 boys disappeared. Nobody knows where they went. So the crown of England rested briefly on Edward's head and passed over to Richard III. And then Richard III went into battle, and he ended up losing his crown. And Henry VII took over, which is the father of Henry VIII, which is a whole nother different story. And the other story I want to bring into is are the Stuarts, the Charles. Presumably Prince Charles, excuse me, it's all a bit much to get used to. King Charles III is probably named after King Charles I, who was the king who was beheaded at Banquet House. This is such a terrible story. In 1649, the British Civil War was going on, and they beheaded the king, and then Oliver Cromwell became like this into the interregnum. He became like the Parliament sort of king. But it's such a terrible story. But everyone was angry with King Charles I because he allegedly misused money, and he misused the army, and he did loads of different things that people didn't like. And so they ended up beheading this poor guy. And so it was a kind of a cold morning, and he didn't want to appear to be afraid, so he asked for 2 shirts so he didn't shiver. And they chopped his head off in front of everybody, because that's how they didn't have TV back then, right? So they had to entertain themselves somehow. And poor King Charles, they said that nobody died with such dignity. He died well. A terrible, terrible story. And I've been to Banquet House, and like Marble Arch, where they used to hang people en masse, it's you get this terrible sinking feeling when you go there. And when I went to Banquet House, I've been there quite a few times now because it's near Buckingham Palace, and I passed through there because I'm American and I can't help myself. You just get this horrible feeling of dread when you pass through, and it's the same with Marble Arch. I can barely walk through Marble Arch or around Marble Arch without feeling like sick to my stomach, thinking about what happened there and the horrible feelings of tragedy that went on there. It's dreadful. Okay, so the third time there's an abdication crisis was 1936. So we got George V was the father, and believe it or not, his death was hastened with morphine. They injected him with a little bit more than what he needed so that he would pass quickly. And then his son Edward VIII took the crown, but he was in love with the American divorcee Wallis Simpson. Here she is here. And they wouldn't let him marry her because she was American. She was divorced. And I think the real reason is because he had too much personality to be king. They wanted someone who's quite boring and quite non-controversial to be king. And so he abdicated in 1936 in December, and George VI took over, and that was his younger brother. So George VI, affectionately known as Bertie, Albert, had no idea that he was going to be king. He had young children, Queen Elizabeth, who became one of the girls who became Queen Elizabeth, and Margaret, and had repercussions for the whole entire family for the rest of their lives. So George VI became the king. So 3 kings one day. Oh, this is the Tower of London. So this is a concentric castle. So you can see this is the original middle bit built by sorry, I'm losing names now. William the Conqueror, and then they just built more and more out here. So if you hear about ravens and things like that, the ravens are all in here. And then this is Tower Bridge here, not London Bridge, Tower Bridge. And this is maybe 4 or 5 miles away from where I live. And at the beginning of the year, I used to get out on the tube station, which is over this side, to see the castle every day. And it was a really great feeling, because I would walk along the Thames just to have a look at everything, admire the Tower Bridge, and just have a look at everything. London is a beautiful, beautiful city full of history, which is what keeps me here, why I've lived here for 32 years. I just love every single day I learned something new about London. Jack the Ripper was not in this area, but a few miles away. There's so many things to learn about Tower Bridge. I've been up here along on the Tower Bridge experience. The bridge used to lift up here to let boats in. The Thames itself is full of history. It's just London is such a great place to live. And anyway, I'll shut up about London. Great place. I talked about the princes in London. So the death of Richard III. So it's chronicled by William Shakespeare, but you can see that Saturn is 24 Scorpio, which is opposite, which will pick up Prince Charles's planets at that degree. And here's Prince Charles I, looking in all his finery. When his head was chopped off, his son Charles II ran off to France. He became known as a merry monarch. When Oliver Cromwell died, he came back. So in 1600, if we look at Algol and we say that 72 years equals 1 degree of Algol, Mercury would have been conjunct Algol at 22 degrees Scorpio. And like I say, we're going to see that Prince Charles's planets pick up these degrees anyway. This is Oliver Cromwell's head. Unfortunately, Oliver Cromwell's Venus is too far out of orb to be conjunct Algol. But this is what happened to Oliver Cromwell. He died, and then when Charles II came back to England, they dug his body up and posthumously hang drawn and quartered him. And then they stuck his head on Traitors' Gate, and the head became lost because it's all dried out and stuff, right? The head became lost, and it kept popping up in different places. But for a long time, nobody conclusively knew where Oliver Cromwell's head was. But this is what was coming up in history books for kids is, okay, well, here's his head, and we really don't know where it is, but it is Oliver Cromwell, and we can't find it. I understand that it has been found, but it's no longer displayed. It's, I don't know, it's some curator's museum somewhere, but a very creepy story anyway. Here we go. Here's Charles II. Love his wig, don't you? So here's Charles I and his son, Charles II. And have a look at this. Okay, so I've explained that Mercury is conjunct Algol at 22 degrees Scorpio, and Charles II's Pluto is conjunct Algol in this time of history. And presumably, like I said, Charles is named after these two. So one was beheaded, the other one became known as the Merry Monarch. And they had this really sort of creepy, freaky sort of connection to Algol. Prince Charles, over here in England, we've been saying for years that Charles wasn't suitable to be king. He's far too sensitive. He's kind of, I don't know how to describe Charles. I got to say, I'm shocked that the British people seem to be supporting him. I'm not sure how long this is going to last, but the British papers, when Diana died, which is 25 years ago, by the way, that has not even been mentioned recently. Usually anything to do with Princess Diana, everyone's devouring, wanting to know, this, that, and the other thing about her death. But this year, there's been nothing. It's been very, very quiet. So 25 years since she died in the car accident, and I saw on the news, Charles had a little freak out over a pen that broke, and he had ink on his hands, and he got very angry about this, and he was like, every stinking time the pen breaks or whatever, he got the date wrong, and Camilla had to step in and help him out. So I want to say, I'm not wishing bad things on Prince Charles. That isn't at all, but I'm just saying, it's a bit of ink. Why freak out over a bit of ink? And Camilla had to finish off this task that he was doing, which was signing some sort of paper or whatever. And Camilla is a lifelong smoker. She doesn't seem to me to be walking around too great. She seems to be quite old. But yet the British people seem to be supporting Prince Charles. And this is the face we're going to see on our notes and on our stamps and on various bits and pieces of anything to do with the royal family. We're going to see Prince Charles. So while I will say long live the king, I don't wish anything bad to happen to him. I do kind of wonder, what will happen and how long he will stay as king. And, I'm going to question the suitability of someone who could freak out over a bit of ink in front of the cameras. And it just makes me wonder, I hope that the British monarchy stays stable. I hope that he inherits his mother's stability. And I also hope that William is ready to take over. So here we go. We have the 3 charts of the kings. Okay, so we have Charles, Prince of Wales. He's now King of England. On the outside, we have Charles I in the very middle, Charles in the second bit, and then Prince Charles on the outside. And remember what I said, Charles is named after Charles I. So King Charles III, sun at 22 degrees Scorpio, has his sun is conjunct the Mercury of Charles I, whose Mercury is on Algol. And then we have Charles I's Pluto, Charles II's Pluto opposite to all that. So we have this connection between these 3 kings. Okay, 1936 was the big abdication crisis, unprecedented. Nobody can really believe that this thing happened. When you're given a crown, you take the crown and you run with it. So many people have died fighting over the crown, and to have a man say, actually, I would like to give up the crown to marry the woman I love. I need the right woman by my side. She's an American divorcee. Very uncomfortable situation, this abdication business. So the Duke of York is the new king. The Duke of York was the younger brother. It's final, irrevocable. After this, the former king went to France to live, went to Paris to live with his American divorcee wife. Everyone was up in arms about this. 1936, we've got so much going on. But here is the abdication itself. So the king made his speech just after 10 o'clock. So I'm about as near as I can be in London. He made it via radio, and he said, I'm no longer going to be king. The planet I want to point out is Uranus at 6 degrees. We've had a Uranus return on this chart recently, but to have a king say, I want to marry the woman I love and I don't want to have any more problems about this, was a really big thing. And 0 degrees of the fixed signs is something else that features in a lot of the royal charts. The Queen, the King, Queen Elizabeth, King Charles, and Prince William all have important planets at 0 degrees of fixed signs. And like I say, this is a time chart. The moon was opposite to Algol. Here we go with that. And I think Wallis Simpson and Meghan Markle, aside from being both being American divorcees, I think they share quite a remarkable likeness to each other. And Meghan's Pluto in Libra is conjunct Wallis Simpson's moon in Libra. Only a few minutes separating them. So, and not too far away from Uranus as well. So they are, connected in some way. And I really dislike the way that the British newspapers pick on Meghan. I don't think they've given her a fair shot. Kind of the way they picked on Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, as we called her. They just pick on her and treat her so badly over here. And look at Meghan's moon, Saturn, and Jupiter all conjunct in Libra. She's all about, the relationships and all about, considering other people. Edward VIII of the UK, Edward VIII was the one who abdicated. He has his Venus conjunct Algol, as does Princess Diana and oh dear, not Harry, the other one, the older one. They all have their Venus on this important degree of Algol. And the Abdication Crisis with the 6 degrees of Uranus in Taurus, showing here. So here's Meghan and Harry. They're married on the 19th of May, 2018. Guess where the sun was? Yes, yes, yes. Not too far away from Algol. The marriage between Prince Charles and Princess Diana was something that a lot of people had a lot of doubt about before it even happened. She was a lot younger than him. He was older for his years. She was quite immature for her years. So everyone was looking at, that being a real problem in this marriage. But, she ticked all the boxes. She was a aristocrat family. She liked the country. She did, she was supposedly easy to get along with. But people had doubts about it from the very start. So here's her Venus, conjunct Algol, 24 degrees. Over here, like her sun. The Abdication Crisis took place at 6 degrees Taurus. You can see it's not too far away from opposition to Neptune. And then the wedding itself took place with Uranus opposite to Algol at 26 degrees Scorpio. So Algol would be at 26 degrees Taurus. So here it shows opposite. Now, Diana did this explosive interview where she admitted basically that she had had an affair, that her and Charles weren't getting along very well, that Charles had an affair too with Camilla, that it was this great big, writhing mess of accusations. When she gave that interview, the Sun and Mercury were both conjunct the Uranus of the wedding chart, which was opposite to Algol. So the Algol connection continues within the royal family. So here we have, this is a few years ago, we have Prince William and Prince Harry and Kate and the children. So William has Venus conjunct Algol. He has Jupiter at 0 Scorpio, which picks up his father's planets at 0 degrees, as well as Queens. We have Harry with Venus at 2 degrees Scorpio, not too far away from William's Jupiter. This little guy, oh, I'm so sorry, his name escapes me at the moment, is part of fortune at 26 degrees Taurus, which is on Algol. Catherine's MC is at 6 degrees Taurus, which is conjunct the Uranus of the Abdication Crisis. And we have this little one, Mars, not too far away from Algol. So the family is deeply entrenched, and Louis has his son at 3 degrees Taurus and Venus at 28 degrees Taurus, all picking up Algol vibes, as well as the early degrees of conjunction for the rest of the family. So in 2018, we had President Trump come over to England, and this was like, I can't even describe how everybody felt about having Trump over here. It was this weird, it was almost like Trump was told how to behave, but he did everything that he wasn't supposed to do. There were so many things that went wrong with this tour. Things like he walked in front of the Queen, which you never do. It was like the Queen was totally eclipsed by Donald Trump, and the British were up in arms about this. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know. Maybe you guys are laughing about this, but I you know, for me, as you know, this Brit living over here in an American living over here in Britain, I was just like, oh my gosh, can we be embarrassed anymore? It was just this total thing about what is going on with this guy. So it was a solar partial eclipse. So here is the Queen's. Here's the eclipse here, 20 degrees, and it was right on the Queen's North Node. And to see this event was absolutely like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, it was just like it was just like this huge embarrassment. It's just difficult to describe how to feel about these things. Anyway, the Queen's North Node was here, and the eclipse was right on that North Node when this happened. And I think that a lot of Americans, a lot of British just didn't know where to look with this event going on. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Queen, and I could see that there's a lot of comments in the chat, and maybe you want to say something about the Queen, and I hope that we can sort of manage this. So let's break this all down. Here's the last photo of our Queen. She was on her feet and doing work the day before she died. She took to her bed on the day that she died. So it wasn't like that. It was like a long sort of process of her dying. She died, you know, pretty much straight away. But have a look at where her Saturn is. Saturn is conjunct the midheaven. She was always known for being somebody who put everything into her role, for giving everything that she had. It can seem quite gruesome that we're parading her body from Scotland all the way down to London. I said at the very beginning, after I finish this, I'm going to put on some warm socks, and I'm going down to the center of London to leave some flowers and a card that I have for her. I'm going to be up all night. I'm going to have a vigil for the Queen. But look at how hard she works. You know, she's always been there for us, and for many of us who, you know, are you know, the age that we are now, we've only known Queen Elizabeth to be our Queen. And I see a lot of cards and condolences left for the country's grandmother. You know, she's somebody who's always been the face of England, and now she's no longer here, and it's going to be Charles. So many interesting things going on in her chart. So Charles had his planets at 0 degrees Scorpio, and William has his planets at 0 degrees Aquarius. And here's the Queen's Sun, just inside Taurus. We have the eclipses going on, the nodes on her ascendant descendant axis. We have this Venus that is just so giving and so warm and just sacrificial. Of course, she's a queen. She has her moon in Leo. What better place to have a queen? And my friend Richard Fiddler pointed out that in the Vedic system, the moon would have been up here in the 10th. Sorry, I can't quite remember. I'm gonna check this out. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's just so much to do with, you know, the queen charts being an appropriate one and being something that, you know, it fits the whole entire country. And if I take away her photograph, you know, we see different aspects going on here. Mars opposite to Neptune for all the sacrifice that she gave us. But what I really wanted to point out was when her last eclipse, the total lunar eclipse, the May 16th, the last eclipse of her life, because I'm so focused on Algol, this jumped out to me. And when I saw it, I was so shocked that I didn't dare say a thing about what was going on, because I don't predict deaths and all that kind of thing. But just to point out to you, the sun was on Algol, and here's the moon over here, the opposite. It was on her ascendant descendant axis, square to Saturn. And you know, like I say, this is her last eclipse. It's you know, the bookends of an extraordinary life. And you know, God save the Queen, long live the King. We all have to over here have to getting on with our lives and with everything going forward. I could take some questions. Here's the Queen with Paddington Bear, her last commercial she did. I'm packing some marmalade sandwiches in tribute to the Queen when I leave in a few minutes to go see her in state. Here's a million different ways of contacting me if you want to ask me any questions, you want to have a little conversation. My website is www.alextrenoweth.co.uk. Here's me before I had COVID hair. I've been working on bringing astrology to education for the past several years. My book is Growing Pains and Mirror Mirror. Here's where you can contact me on social media. I'm Alex Trenoweth, very creatively known as Alex Trenoweth, on all social media platforms. I do a lot of work for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency and for Kepler College as well, and for ESAR and OPA. I'm doing a retreat in Australia. If you want to join us, come join us. And yes, so that's it. So now I can take some questions. So this is Meghan's chart. I think that the newspapers have given Meghan a really horrible time. I think some of it has to do with the American divorcee thing, but you know, you can see that her Chiron picks up on Charles the First. That's his Mercury degree. So there are strong connections there between you know, historically with them. I hope that Meghan can integrate into the British family again. I hope that they will start to be a little bit more accepting with the Queen's death. And you know, again, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not happy the Queen died. I'm not. There's nothing like that in my feelings. I'm just thinking that the royal family needs to move on a bit. And if you watch The Crown, they made a really good point about saying, like, how sad it is that, you know, they interfered with relationships all the way through. Like, Diana and Charles really weren't a great match. And Princess Margaret wasn't allowed to marry the man that she loved because he wasn't, you know, what the royal family thought should have been, you know, for Margaret. And Camilla and Charles, they put a lot of effort into making sure that they couldn't marry either. So I'm really hoping that, you know, there can be like some sort of bridge made that Meghan will be more accepted into the British royal family. I'm hoping that that calms down, but I'm not hopeful. I gotta say.
Yeah. We've got a question in here. Was it unusual in the royal family that the Queen lived to 96, or are there long lives for many royals?
Oh yeah, the Queen Mother lived to be 102. That's the Queen's mother, and then Queen Victoria lived to be, quite an old age too. I think sorry, I can't remember when she died, but I know she died a very old lady. And the first Queen Elizabeth lived a good life too. So remember that the royal family has the best access to health care and everything. So, they're going to live good lives, good long lives. But Camilla
Right.
is a lifelong smoker. Bear that in mind too. And I don't see her getting around very well.
Though she doesn't have the blood, she doesn't have the royal lineage. Do you have a chart for Kate?
I do. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'll pull that up too. So, moon in Cancer. Full moon. Look at that. I just screen grabbed this from astro.com. So, wow. Okay. So born in a full moon. I didn't realize that. Capricorn sun, moon in Cancer. Venus conjunct Mercury over here. She must have planets conjunct to Meghan with the Libra stuff going on here. I think it was 21 degrees for the Moon Pluto conjunction with Wallis Simpson, and here is her. Is that right? It's 22 degrees Saturn. So the Saturn sits on the Moon Pluto conjunction. I'm just going to go look see if any more questions are there.
Somebody's asking if you can share her data. Did you save the data for her?
For Kate.
Mm-hmm.
Princess of Wales Catherine is the 9th of January, 1982 at 7 p.m. in Reading, England. 9th of January, 1982, 7 p.m. in Reading, Reading.
Great, thank you. Now, there's so many questions here now, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to get to them all, but we'll try. So the next one up is, how is the British chart in terms of losing the Queen and getting the new king?
That might be a little bit more complicated. I am going to write this article for the Astrological Journal of Great Britain, putting everything together. So if you want to get a copy of that, I'll have that data in there. And there is something on my website about the 1801 chart.
Okay.
So that is that was the 1st of January. Usually we use the midnight chart for that day. 1801, 1st of January at midnight. 12:01 in the morning, 0001 in the morning. So you can check that out too.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now there's a list of questions from this one person, and I'm not sure, whether you will have answers to this, because this is almost like, have you thought about these in terms of making predictions, I suppose? How long will King Charles reign? Will William ascend to the throne? Will Harry be allowed back into the family fold?
I did make a little prediction in that I didn't think that Charles, I thought that his reign wouldn't be long. And British astrologers have said for ages Charles would never be king. But I thought that Charles would be king, but only for a short time and then passing over to William. But there's practical reasons why I've said that. First of all, the Queen was getting old, and there's no point in making a prediction about somebody. I don't make predictions about when people die. And I didn't want to get drawn into that. But I have questions around Camilla's health, just because she's a lifelong smoker, not because anything in her chart. And also, I was talking about the times that there were 3 kings on the throne, with Edward the Confessor, Richard III, and the Abdication Crisis. So I am thinking that Charles won't be on the throne for very long. And what I've seen this week, I've seen somebody who's really doesn't seem to be all that suitable have a crown on his head. Having a temper tantrum over a pen, that seemed a bit ridiculous to me. So that's just my opinion, though. That's nothing really to do with the astrology
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah, we'd need to look at a few more types of charts to be able to answer those questions. So do you speculate that there will be 3 monarchs this year?
I do. I have said that in my some articles that I've written on my website, that I thought that this could be a year, or that there would be a year where there'd be three monarchs on the throne in 1 year. It's not quite a prediction, but it's it looks more and more like that's might be the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you looked at Henry VIII re Algol, given that he chopped off so many people's heads?
So the rhyme goes: divorced, beheaded, died; divorced, beheaded, survived, for his 6 wives. So Anne Boleyn, and he also had and not Seymour. Dear me, now you're really testing my history. I haven't looked at him in terms of the royal family, because he was on the throne for an extended period of time, and I do have his chart somewhere, but I can't remember how that worked or if it did. He was an extraordinary king. His palace is Hampton Court Palace, and you can take the boat down to Hampton Court Palace. It's a really good trip to go down there and see all this stuff. But no, I haven't looked at it in terms of the modern British family, because that was the end of the Tudors, and then Stuarts came in, and then so different families came in. So I'm only looking at it in terms of the Windsors, or the Coke Sagbergs, the modern British family, and how they came in to the story.
Great, thank you. Does Harry have anything near or opposite Algol?
He has a near miss, and I can't remember what it is. He has a planet near to Algol, or maybe opposite Algol. I can't remember, but there is something there. But Harry is so far down the line now. He'll never be king. You don't have to worry about Harry anymore. He's now a minor character. He'll never get in there, because William has 3 children, all who are eligible to be on the throne. So it'll never be Harry.
What do you think the significance is that Algol is on Prince William's Venus?
Okay. Why do you think he reacts the way he does whenever the paparazzi gets too close to him? Look at how him and Harry react. They were teenagers when Princess Diana died, and I wrote an article about the Jupiter return of the death of Diana. Harry was 11 when Diana died. He was in the midst of that important brain development, and William was at the end. They're both like marked by this terrible event. So we're not going to get away. Diana's had all these intensive relationships in her life, and so that's how I think it manifested. And same with Edward VIII, the king who abdicated. He had his Venus there too. They're all tied in together, and Charles and Camilla don't have these connections to Algol. So I think more reasons why I think Prince William will probably be more. I think the British public, and this is my opinion, will be more comfortable with William as the king. Not to mention his name is William the Conqueror, right? Named after a conqueror, as opposed to someone who got their head chopped off. There's lots of reasons why I think William should be the king. That's my opinion.
This is a question that I don't know whether we don't expect you to do the research right now if you haven't already. But is there an astrological pattern with the years 1066, 1483, 1649, and 1936 with Algol?
Yes, Algol runs through that. If you do the calculations, if you give 72 years, 1 degree for 72 years, Algol does run through all those years.
Okay, there you go. So the short answer is yes. Let's see, what else have we got here? Have you looked at Elizabeth the First's chart? And is there any overlap?
Yes, I have. So remember, Elizabeth the first didn't become Elizabeth the First until Elizabeth the Second became queen, right? Does that make sense? Because Elizabeth the First was only known as Queen Elizabeth until there was a second Queen Elizabeth.
Of course.
She became Queen Elizabeth First.
Yes.
So I think that's interesting. And I can't remember the connection, but there was a moment when Queen Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth the First. And I can't remember what the connection is off the top of my head, but there is something there.
Interesting. Okay. All right. The relationship, a question about if you could comment on the relationship between Elizabeth and Philip compared to that of Albert and Victoria.
You know, I don't know those charts well enough to do that. That would be interesting. It's interesting because Philip was kind of this, for lack of a better word, a trashy king from a fallen kingdom. That's interesting. So I can't remember off the top of my head. That's a lot of charts to look into. So.
All right, fair enough. Someone is asking if you know if the death time has been recorded as 4:30 p.m. for the Queen.
Okay, so my understanding is 4:30 was a time that was released to the BBC. And I think that she died before that. There's been a couple of accounts that say that she died before then. And as I was saying, you know, it's odd that the Queen was on her feet and running around the day before with the Prime Minister and everything like that. And she only took to her sickbed on the day that she actually died. I think that's interesting. And because I've worked with people who have been on their deathbeds, when do you call it? When do you say someone is actually dying, or have they died? Lack of heartbeat, lack of breathing, the chain stoking that comes in. When do you actually call it? When the doctor says, you know, so there's lots of questions in my mind about, you know, when a person dies.
Right. Kind of similar to the different answers that you get about what is the moment of birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar problems that we have. Could you show Camilla's chart? Have you looked at that one?
I'm not a big fan of Camila, I gotta say. The whole entire relationship between Charles and Camilla doesn't sit well with me. In that first of all, I mean, they were basically, Camilla was not seen as being suitable for Charles because she was a bit of a tart. There's no other way of putting it. And you know, so Charles was banned from being married to her, and so he's kind of pushed into marrying Diana, and Camilla was sort of persuaded to marry Andrew, and Andrew Parker Bowles, that is. And the whole thing, you know, it's very sad, really. They should have just been allowed to get married. And the other thing is too about Andrew and Algol. I just remembered Saturn was transiting Algol when he was involved in the case in America with Weinstein, and he was allegedly having pizza with his daughters. Saturn was transiting Algol, and Koo Stark, who stood up for Andrew, said, "Oh, he would never do such a thing." Has, I believe it's Mercury conjunct Algol.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. Someone is asking, in 1992, the Annus Horribilis for Queen Elizabeth, was there some aspect with Algol in her natal chart?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but you know, that was an Annus Horribilis for sure. That was when her castle burned down and 3 of the children got divorced. You know, it was a bad year, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I just can't believe you don't remember all of this off the top of your head. I'm just shocked, Alex. Would be nice to have that photographic memory.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm gonna write this. I'm gonna write this whole entire thing up for the Astrological Journal. Hopefully, get it pulled together for tomorrow if I get home tonight.
Yeah, fantastic.
From and you can check it out there. I will definitely post it on my blog at some point. But you know, obviously the journal will want, you know, the first pickings of the article.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, I look forward to that. Did you, and I had stepped away for a minute too, so I can't answer this question myself, but did you discuss Prince William's Saros cycle?
Okay, so yeah, the thing about William, and it's been said for many, many years, that he is the last of the Saros cycle for his particular eclipse, and that he'll be the last king, or he won't be king. People said that for many years. So you know, let's see what happens. You know, it is, I mean, I think it's completely possible that Charles will mess it all up, and nobody will want him to be king, and everyone will turn against the monarchy. That's completely possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question here. It's the same person who had asked about the beheading. Could Mercury stand for a voice taken away, not being heard with the conjunction to Algol?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, poor old Prince. I like I said, I feel terrible about Prince Charles I getting beheaded. That was a horrible thing to have to happen. Imagine you're the king, and then you lose your head. You know,
Yeah.
that is the Algol connection there. Yeah, he did lose his voice, and it was taken over by Oliver Cromwell, who, you know, he was a Puritan. Oliver Cromwell. That's where the Pilgrims came from. It came to New England in the States. Those were his people. So yeah, it is a silencing of the king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite literally.
Mm.
Have you looked at the positive outcomes from Algol?
I think there are all sorts of possibilities. As we know with transits, there are all sorts of ways of interpreting transits and ways of spinning them so that they are positive. And I think Algol can be a positive thing. Algol is about, you know, passion, obsession, and, you know, at least sticking with things to the very end. So I think there can be positive outcomes of Algol. As I said, not everyone who has Algol contacts loses their head. You know, there can be good things that come out of it. So yeah, I do think that there can be good things.
Like everything, there's shadow and light, right?
Yep, right.
Some configurations are going to bring more shadow than light, and vice versa, but there's always a silver lining in things. So one last question I think I'm going to ask you here, which is a good one. What orb do you use for Algol?
Okay, so it depends. Now, if you're looking at a natal planet conjunct to Algol, it's really 1 degree either side. But if you're looking at a transit, because the planet is bringing in that energy, I'm a little bit more generous, and I'll give it a bit more. So if it's a transit, a bit more generous to Algol. If it's a natal fixed point, I'm a little bit stingy, and 1 degree either way. And remember, Algol moves 72 degrees. Take it back. 1 degree every 72 years. So when looking at historical things, you have to make your calculations appropriately.
Perfect. Yeah, great. Now, this last question I'm going to ask you has nothing to do with Algol. What kind of reactions have you had to your new book? Tell us about your latest book.
Oh, right. Okay. My latest book. Hold on. I just happen to have it right here. So, Mirror Mirror was a sort of a palate cleanser, amuse-bouche, to Growing Pains, because Growing Pains was written in 2013, and when I started writing Mirror Mirror, of course, the schools closed down, and I wasn't sure that the schools were ever going to open again, because of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which I thought would herald this new beginning of education, the way we educate our children. And so I wasn't sure schools are going to open up again. But I've had really, really good reactions to Mirror Mirror, basically because it's, you know, over 100 case studies looking at synastry. I keep the orbs nice and tight. It's about interesting people and the actors who portrayed them. So yeah, it's been good. It got to 33 on Amazon earlier this year. It hovered around there for a few weeks. Growing Pains got to number 8, as far as I know. Maybe it got higher than that, I don't know. But they seem to be helping each other in the Amazon charts. And I know there's different ways of measuring success, but Amazon is important. So it's been a good reaction to Mirror Mirror. I'm very, very pleased that I've written 2 books that rely on a lot of research. It's not just sun sign stuff. It's just
exactly when you've got books with that kind of meat in them, that it's not so simple to just churn them out the way, you know, some sun sign writers are able to. Yeah, so we appreciate the work that you did with both of those books. It's a valuable contribution to the astrology world, and we all appreciate it. And we all appreciate so much you joining us here today, Alex. And
thank you for having me. It's been great fun. Yeah. I don't think I've ever done such a big, we had a huge audience.
We had a big audience, and you did this in very short order too. So I have so much appreciation for you. It's not like a person would have been preparing this chart for years or anything, or this talk for years. So we appreciate that you pulled it together so quickly so that we could deliver to such a curious audience.
Great fun. And thank you everyone for joining us.